Hello everyone! Today we will talk about pragmatics. But first, let's have pragmatics and the structure of discourse. According to Corta et al., pragmatics deals with adherences, by which we will mean specific events, the intentional acts of speakers at times and places, typically involving language. Pragmatics is a major study of linguistics that defines the hidden meanings of a writer and speaker towards the conjoining effort of linguistic form. In simple words, pragmatics is the study of the meaning in context, and it deals with implied meaning as opposed to the mere lexical meaning expressed. To know more about the discourse structure of pragmatics, let's have the pragmatic features. First of all, this type of study necessarily involves the interpretation of what people mean in specific context and how the context influences what is said. Hi, how are you? Lovely weather today. So, you can see it is grammatically correct, but it does not fit context and the situation. Second of the dimensions is this approach also necessarily explores how listeners can make inferences about what is said in order to arrive at an interpretation of the speaker's intended meaning. We might say that is investigation of invisible meaning. Pragmatics is the study of how you mean more gets communicated than is said, which means that you as a listener have to investigate the invisible meaning. For instance, please close the window. The invisible meaning, the person asks that the person is freezing. That room is too noisy outside, depending on the situation. So, for example, if I hear the noise outside, the adherence, please close the window. The invisible meaning which is not being spoken is that it is too noisy. Last dimension is the perspective, then raises the question of what determines the choice between the said and the unsaid. The basic answer is tied to the notion of distance. Closeness, whether it is physical, social, or conceptual, implies shared experience. On the assumption on how close or distant the listener is, speakers determine how much needs to be said. Physical closeness would be, take this. The only person close to the speaker knows what this refers to, and social closeness can be found between friends. For example, if I tell you we had fun at the weekend, you would know that last weekend and that you know which friends of mine I meant by we.
Speech act. Speech act, it is more likely the conveyance of its verbal actions. As you can see on the illustration, the learners compliment their teacher. It could be for good teaching strategies applied. That's why the students compliment their teacher. So now, let's talk about the types of speech acts. First, representatives. It conveys information, whether true or false. For example, Melanie got a perfect score on final examination. So the statement is true since it is factual information. As you can see, there is an evidence that Melanie is perfect on the exam. So next, commissives. Commissives is a way for a speaker to assure that it could be done in the future. For example, wedding vows. So, today, I say I do. But to me, that means I will. I will take your hand and stand by your side in the good and the bad. I dedicate myself to your happiness, success, and smile. I will love you forever. So, the vows represents the action in the future. So now, let's talk about directives. It is an instruction given by the authorities or the superiors. For example, pasulong, good. It is a Filipino military command which means to go forward. The class marcher or the officials have an authority to mandate such command since they have the powers to command and follows by the elements. So now, let's talk about declarations. So, it is an oral or written statement that declares or certifies that it is official. For example, the pastor declares a marriage. So, it means the pastor has a sole authority to certify or declare that they are husband and wife. Lastly, expressive. Expressive. It is an utterance that are spoken to convey speaker's emotion or feelings. So for example, congratulations on your new business. So the example illustrates word expressing phrases for achievement. So now, let's move on to Brown and Levinson's politeness theory. So now, positive politeness strategy. So, it is a way of making utterance that are conventionally polite, flattering, or being cooperative, and etc. As you can see on the illustration, the first man asks to the second man if he wants a ketchup, and he answered politely by saying please and thank you. So, as you can see in their conversation, the first man says that, would you like the ketchup? And the second man, yes. Can you please pass the ketchup? Here we go. Thank you. So, it conveys positive politeness. So now let's talk about negative politeness. So, negative politeness. Avoiding saying things that are inappropriate or using body language. No words used, but politeness is maintained. So, as you can see on the illustration, the student asks if, may I go to the bathroom, teacher? So, she raised her hand as a sign of politeness without saying any polite words, but action did. So, that is negative politeness. So now, let's talk about positive face. So, positive face, it is an appealing to a person's positive face can mean making the individual feel good about it. So, in the picture illustrated, the smiling faces conveys positive face since each other feels good since in the picture they are smiling. And now, let's move on to negative face. Appealing to a person's negative face can mean making the other person feel like they take an advantage. As you can see on the photo, it conveys that the policeman arrests a certain man, but the man didn't fight against it or take an advantage.
Cross-cultural pragmatics. According to Standler 2018, cross-cultural pragmatics denotes a field of study that concerns itself with how language acquires meaning through context and through its sociocultural embedding. Meaning is not inherent in the utterances we produce. Messages have to be interpreted, draw on contextual information, the dynamics between the speaker and his or her interactional partners, and the common knowledge that we share with our conversation. Furthermore, the field of cross-cultural pragmatics examines the speech behavior and values of different cultures, focusing on the meaning of words, the importance of using language in different cultures, the complexities and challenges those involved in the acquisition of pragmatic skills. Pragmatic competence requires recognition of the various rules and convention underlying the appropriate use of language in conversational situation and among members of a specific language domain. Individuals from different societies or communities interact according to their own pragmatic norms. often resulting clash of expectation and ultimately misinterpretation about another group. The important in the study of intercultural pragmatics is the idea of speaker's intention and implication of the resulting conversation. The speaker's intention and the listener's interpretation are often closely aligned, and the changes of getting the intended meaning decrease as cultural differences increase. To improve our ability to understand cultural differences and enable visitors and foreign language learners to manage communication appropriately in their target language, cultural pragmatics examines cultural interaction preferences in a variety of situations. Boller 2019, the ideas can be universalized or generalized to all conversational situations, has been scrutinized by many anthropologists and sociolinguists who found evidence that difference in conversational norms might apply to non-English speaking cultural practice according to diverse societies. Example: the Englishman say, "Would you like to have some juice?" The Spanish child responds, "No." Pragmatics and power. Keating, 2009. Language is an important means through which power relations are created and negotiated. In addition to every choice speakers make about their own language use, variations in ways of talking are related to local theories of power, status, identity, self, ethnicity, class, and gender. Pragmatic uses of language are important tool for constructing social difference and distinction between individuals in terms of efficacy and power. Instrumental power enforces authority and imposed by the law, state, conventions, and organizations. On the other hand, influential power, persuasive and inclines or make us want to behave in a certain way. According to Greece 2015, there are two types of power: instrumental power and influential power. Generally speaking, a person who has the power of a tool has power only because of who he is. It is considered as governance power. These people do not need to convince anyone of their power or get anyone to listen to them. Others must listen to them only because of their authority. For example, government officials and police officers are empowered to act. This refers when a person or a group of people has no authority but tries to gain power and influence over others. People who want to influence can use language to convince others or support them. For example, media and marketing.
Categories such as tense. In terms of the semantic content of the dialectic words, they may be divided into 5 groups: person deixis, time deixis, place deixis, discourse deixis, and social deixis. Now let's have examples. Ice floats on water. It's raining. I am hungry. The first sentence would not cause any difficulty for its interpretation in isolation. Whoever says at whatever time and place, its meaning would not change. But the second and the third sentences, which contain indexical expressions, depend on the context heavily. A presupposition is something the speaker assumes to be the case prior to making an utterance. It is the speakers who have presuppositions. Let's look at the famous example given by Gottlob Frege, the German philosopher who first attracted the notice of the scholarly world. Kepler died in misery. We can identify some of the potentially assumed information that would be associated with the utterance. In producing the utterance, the speaker will normally be expected to have the presupposition that a person called Kepler exited because without the existence of Kepler, one cannot talk about his dying in misery. Background knowledge and common sense, all of which will help us to understand the meaning of presupposition. Understanding the meaning of presupposition will be beneficial to various parts of English learning: listening, speaking, reading, writing, and speaking. In the theory of conversational implicature, Grice suggests that there is an underlying principle that determines the way in which language is used maximally, efficiently, and effectively to achieve rational interaction in communication. He called the governing dictum the cooperative principle and elaborated in 4 sub-principles called maxims as shown in the following. The maxim of quantity. You should make your contribution as informative as is required for the current purposes of the exchange, and do not make your contribution more informative than it is required. The maxim of quality. Try to make your contribution one that is true, and do not say what you believe to be false. Do not say that for which you lack adequate evidence. The maxim of relevance. Relation should be relevant. And lastly, we have the maxim of manner. Manner be perspicuous. Avoid obscurity of expression, avoid ambiguity, be brief or avoid unnecessary prolixity, and be orderly. And that concludes our topic. Thank you so much for listening.